Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshur-militam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We have some topics today that those of you who have read Nectar of Devotion and studied it and remember it may find familiar. And we're going to see how far we get today. We have on the menu the 5 potent forms, especially potent forms of Bhakti, and also the 9 symptoms of ecstatic love for Krishna. Let's see how far we get today, because as I prepared for this seminar, I saw the depths just becoming deeper and deeper. So first of all, let me ask you all, how many are very familiar with the section of Nectar Devotion, the 5 potent practices of Bhakti? Raise your hand. Oh, very good. Thank you for giving me that clarity. We're going to use as our theme, our resounding theme in this morning session, a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I'd like to explain to you all why there is such a correlation between Chaitanya Charitamrita and Nectar of Devotion. As some of you may know, Nectar of Devotion is Srila Prabhupada's summary study of the Vaishnava classic text, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami. So I hope to show you the correlation, the connection between Chaitanya Charitamrita and Nectar Devotion, or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In this way, my goal is that you'll see how authorized and scientific is the process of bhakti. Last night, in this same building, we had a program aimed at an audience that was not so familiar with the length and breadth of the Bhakti ocean. And we were consoling them that they don't have to fear. Bhakti is not a belief-based position for you to take. Generally, people think of religion as belief. Well, I believe this. What do you believe? And if they want to be very liberal and open-minded, they'll say to you, well, tell me about your belief system. I've got my belief system. Everyone has a belief system. Bhakti is far beyond a belief system. And I hope to impress that upon you as we discuss the 5 potent forms of devotional service. These activities of devotional service are called angas. And so today we're going to be discussing the pancha angas, the 5 main activities. This is all coming from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his instruction to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. So in case you're wondering about the source of all this devotional information, it is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, coming as his own devotee, appearing as his own devotee, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The scene, which we'll discuss more later because I think it's very important. The scene is in Prayag, at a place called the Dasashvamedha Ghat. And there, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is instructing Rupa Goswami for 10 straight days, giving Rupa Goswami, as we'll find out later, the basic outline of the whole ocean of devotion. And then he'll ask Rupa Goswami, you please drill down more in your explication, in your presentation. Take the themes I'm giving you and expand upon them. So that's what Rupa Goswami does in Nectar of Devotion. It's coming all in as a seed. It's coming from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the theme that I like to keep resonating in your consciousness is this concise statement by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a very easy verse to memorize. It's in Bengali, but Bengali is very easy. It's quite a bit like Sanskrit. So, we're going to read a summary of these 5 most potent forms of bhakti. Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan Mathura Vasa Sri Mutira Shradaya Sevam. Repeat. Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan Mathura Vasa Sri Murtira Shradaya Seva. So Sadhu Sangha refers to association with devotees, number 1. Number 2, Nama Kirtan, chanting the holy name. Number 3, Bhagavat Shravan, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Mathura Vasa, number 4, living at Mathura. Mathura includes Vrindavan. Sri Murtira Shradaya Sevan, worshipping the deity with faith and veneration. So Mahaprabhu is speaking. One should associate with devotees, chant the holy name of the Lord, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, reside at Mathura, and worship the deity with faith and veneration. These 5 limbs of devotional service are the best of all. Even a slight performance of these 5 awakens love for Krishna. So please keep this in mind. These 5 items have previously been mentioned, but they're being repeated. You see, before we get to this point of the focus, the spotlight on these 5 activities, you should know that Rupa Goswami gives a list of 64 items of devotional service. These are taken from a work by Sanatana Goswami called Hari Bhakti Vilas, in which innumerable bhakti items are presented. But Rupa Goswami, the brother of Sanatana Goswami, has taken 64. They're called angas, or limbs of devotional service. Some of the angas, some of the limbs, refer to a complex of activities, just like worshiping the deity. Under the, or included in the limb of worshiping the deity are so many things. Stand up when a procession of the deity comes by. Don't do this before the deity. Do that before the deity. So some of the angas refer to a complex, a bundle of activities. Other of the 64 items that Rupa Goswami has selected refer to just a singular activity, like Guru Padashraya, take shelter of a guru. There's no further items contained to form a bundle in reference to Guru Padashraya. Actually, when you look at this list of 64, you realize how scientific bhakti is, because it includes items or activities that encompass all your body, mind, and sense activities. So bhakti, once again, is not about belief. You may believe this way, you may believe that way, but what are you doing with your mind, your body, and your senses? How are you going to spiritualize your mind, body, and senses? It's not a question of belief, it's a question of activity. Some of you may recall at the very beginning of Nectar of Devotion, it's pointed out that bhakti is not an armchair philosophy. Remember Bhagavad Gita. Where is Krishna speaking to Arjuna? On a battlefield, the most active place you could think of. Because Krishna wants to make it clear that bhakti involves activity and senses. Sense activity. So it's very important that the process of devotional service includes the functioning of all your senses, your body, and your mind. This is so different from just religious theology and religious belief. Unless you have the information as to what to do with your body, mind, and senses, how are you actually going to access the spiritual reality? You can't do it just by belief. So this is why Krishna, in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, says, Raja Bija Raja Guya. This is the king of knowledge, the most secret of all secrets. What's the secret? The activities of the body and mind and senses in pure devotional service. That is the secret of all secrets. Activity, action items, not theological beliefs. And Krishna says, it's the perfection of dharma. Why? Sasukam kartamavya prayaksha avagamam dharmyam. First of all, it gives direct perception. This bhakti dharma gives direct perception of the real self by experience, by realization. Sasukam kartamavya. It is joyfully performed. It's inexhaustible. There's no limit to bhakti. You don't have to worry about reaching the end of all the bhakti resources. Like fossil fuels or something. Everything about Krishna is inexhaustible and unlimited. I remember, I must confess, when I first started reading Srila Prabhupada's books, I was not going to any devotee gathering, any temple. I just, as many of you know, just loved the books and didn't want to associate with devotees. So I remember first reading about the spiritual world. And I thought, this sounds so wonderful. I should hurry up and go there before it gets overcrowded. And I must mention, the other thing I thought of when reading Prabhupada's books, all on my own, no devotee sangha, I kept reading about offering your food and then honoring the remnants. So I thought, well, I took the literal English meaning of remnants, what's left over. So I thought, who's going to do this? You cook up a pot of food, and then you offer it, and then you throw out the food, and whatever clings to the bottom of the pot, the remnants, that's what you take. That's what I thought. I said, I'm never doing this. That shows you how we need the association of devotees. So we want to be clear that your involvement in bhakti means a systematic program for engaging your mind, body, and senses in activity. So Rupa Goswami has selected 5 of the 64 items as super special. And he's glorifying those 5 items because this is what Lord Chaitanya has done. We'll continue. If your bhakti life is full of those 5 items, then you are successful. This is the wealth. This is the property that you're after. This is the investment property that should dominate your life. These 5 items. Sadhu Sangha, association with devotees. Nama Kirtan, chanting Hare Krishna. Bhagavat Shravan, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam with attention and submission. Mathura Vasa, living in a holy place, which can actually be Vrindavan, Navadvip, or Jagannath Puri. Sri Murtira, worshiping the deity with faith and veneration. How is your life containing those 5 items? This is our point we want you to focus on in this morning session. If you can understand the importance of these 5 items, you'll see how Srila Prabhupada has built up the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He's built up a multinational organization that profusely offers, abundantly offers these 5 most potent forms of devotional service. So that's what's going on at the Radha Gopinath Mandir. You see, there's opportunity to associate with devotees. There's chanting of Hare Krishna. There's attentive hearing, at least opportunity to hear Bhagavatam attentively. And you say, well, what about living in a holy place? Sydney? This is a mystical point that Srila Prabhupada explained in Melbourne during his visit in 1976. He explained that for those absorbed in Mandir Seva, serving in the Mandir, if they're thinking, everything I'm doing is for Krishna's pleasure, they're not in Sydney. In that case, he was talking about Melbourne. This is not Melbourne. This is Vaikuntha. And then he went further. This is Goloka Vrindavan. If you have the attitude that you simply want to satisfy Krishna and that Krishna is the enjoyer, You're not in any mundane city. So that shows you the peak potential of Mathura Vasa. Srila Prabhupada was very firm about that. This is not Melbourne. If you have this attitude, if you have this kind of Krishna consciousness, you are not in Melbourne, you are in Goloka Vrindavan. If everything you do is for Krishna's pleasure, according to Krishna's desire. Now let's look at nectar of devotion. But before we get there, let's hear Lord Chaitanya's verdict about the 5 potent forms, most potent forms of devotional activity. Mahaprabhu is underlining, he's saying, the power of these 5 principles is very wonderful and difficult to understand. Can you see that? It's difficult to understand because you might just take it as just no big deal. My grandmother did this in Gujarat. Hindu granny wisdom. Just cultural artifacts, cultural activities, tradition. But no. Take it from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The power of these 5 principles is very wonderful and difficult to understand. Even without faith in them, a person who is offenseless can awaken his dormant love of Krishna simply by being a little connected with them. This is a verse for those who like Shastric details and information. This is a verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Duru had bhutta viryesmin shradha dure stupanchake yatra sopho pisambhanda sadhyam bhava janmane. Just a little bit of connection. If someone doesn't make offenses, even though they may not have faith in these 5 potent forms of devotional service, they can still awaken their dormant love for Krishna. Offenses, that's the key. As we progress in bhakti, we want to become more and more mindful of all the various kinds of offenses. That means you're becoming sensitive in a relationship with Krishna. When someone is becoming dear to you, you want to make sure that you're not doing anything that rubs them the wrong way. So as a devotee progresses in bhakti, he or she wants to make sure I'm not committing offenses. Because even someone who has no faith in these 5 potent forms can awaken the dormant love for Krishna if there are no offenses. So what to speak of someone who has faith in these 5 potent forms and who has daily immersion in these 5 potent forms? So you might say, well, what's happening with us then? What's going on? We have faith in these 5 activities, and we're very much connected to them, we think, at least once a week. And so, where's our dormant love of Krishna? Offenses. And nectar devotion will educate you about the offenses. There's nam aparad, offenses to the holy name. There's seva aparad, offenses to the deity. Vaishnava aparad, offenses to devotees. As we advance in bhakti, just like in any relationship, you want to become more and more conscious of how to please the beloved and how not to irritate the beloved. So this is Krishna consciousness. to be conscious of what gives Krishna pleasure and what does not give Krishna pleasure. This is relationship common sense. So using the contemporary vocabulary, the more you give these 5 items quality time, the more wealthy your spiritual life becomes. So Mahaprabhu himself, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, is letting you know, yes, this is difficult to understand. Why? Because we take it for granted. Oh, chanting Hare Krishna is always happening. Someone's always doing it somewhere. Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Well, it depends on who's giving class, whether I pay attention. Worshipping the deity. Well, when the curtains are open, I'm very attentive. So on and so forth. We take these activities for granted because we think the main thing is what? I believe in Krishna. That's the main thing. And my parents, they believed in Krishna. So there it is. No, there it is not. A Vaishnava steadily seeks to increase the quantity of these 5 activities and their quality. In that way, you can judge how your spiritual life is developing. So again, remember that Srila Prabhupada has based ISKCON on these pancha angas, these 5 limbs. So ISKCON is not like some social club that you belong to. No, it is the devotional service entity that you participate in. So let's look at some of these. Well, we'll try to cover all these 5 items, especially as described in Nectar Devotion. First of all, deity worship. Srimurti. Srimurti Seva. You would be surprised, perhaps, to know that in Nectar of Devotion, when Srila Prabhupada discusses that particular form of devotional service, service to the deity, he is mainly talking about deities at home. Let's hear about it. You would be surprised. You would think he should be talking about deities in the temple. But no. And we'll elaborate on this because I think it's very important for you. We want to make this seminar practical for your everyday situation. Certainly I could talk about very intricate bhakti items, but I want to make sure that you have something you can take home with you that you can apply in your practical situation. So let's listen. First of the Pancha Angas is deity worship. The purport of this verse is that if someone becomes attached to Sri Murti, or the deity of Krishna, by worshiping at home, then he will forget his relationships of so-called friendship, love, and society. Thus, it is the duty of every householder to install deities of the Lord at home and to begin the process of worshiping along with all of his family members. This will save everyone from such unwanted activities as going to clubs, cinemas, and dancing parties, and smoking, drinking, and so forth. All such nonsense will be forgotten if one stresses the worship of the deities at home. All right, how many of you go to clubs, cinemas, and dancing parties? Raise your hand. No. We won't ask about smoking and drinking. But know that all such nonsense will be forgotten if one stresses the worship of the deities at home. So now you're saying, wait a minute, we thought deity worship is something that's done in the temple, in the mandir. Yes, but there is a difference between the archana, the worship at the temple, and generally what goes on in a householder's home if family has deities at home. Let me explain. Traditionally, maybe 100 years ago or so, in wealthy Indian families, there was always in their palatial home, there was always a small temple with deities. And all the family members, Srila Prabhupada talks about this from his youth at the beginning of the 20th century. All the family members would come to Mangalarti in their home temple every morning. And if one of them was late, he or she had to pay a fine to the deity. That, so Prabhupada explained, that's the way a very cultured family would operate. We have a different situation these days. You know how life is in Sydney better than I. No time for anything. And we're so happy if our members will chant 16 rounds, especially if they're able to do that before going to work. But it's a struggle, I know. Life in the world today, in the big city, means a different mantra than the Hare Krishna mantra. It means time, money, time, money, money, time, money, time. Time, money, time, money, time, money, money, time, money, time. Never enough of either, right? Especially as I've been speaking at some of our programs we've had the past 2 weeks. Sydney is now certified as the #2 most expensive place for accommodation in the world. It's up there at the top with Hong Kong and Vancouver. So you've got to scramble. How can you have time for full deity worship at home? This is why the mandir becomes even more important. Because when you come to the mandir at least once a week, then you can see the full deity worship program, something you could never do at home. I remember in the 70s in Los Angeles, at that temple community, which occupied many buildings in a neighborhood, there was a controversy amongst the grihastas about why should I cross the street to the temple to see the deities, Rukmini, Dwarkadis, when I have in my apartment, my flat, I've got my own little deities. So the controversy reached Srila Prabhupada, who said that, all right, if in your home puja, you are following the same exact standard as the archana, the puja in the temple, then you can stay home. Now, we all know about the puja at the temple. How many offerings a day?
7.
7 offerings a day. How many times clothes are changed? Twice a day. How many artis?
7.
Some say 7, 5, some say 5. In any case, can you do that at home?
No.
Every day, bathing, dressing, Govinda prayers. So Srila Prabhupada's point was that if you can make your home puja the same level as what goes on in the temple, then you can say, I have my deities at home, there's no need for me to attend the temple. But how many of you can do that? So, am I saying you can't have any deities at home? Did I say that? The most effective deity worship, many senior devotees like me agree, the most effective home deity worship is worshiping Sri Sri Gaur Nitai. They accept no offenses, and they are pleased simply by your chanting and dancing in front of them. That's the main puja for Sri Sri Gaur Nitai. But often I hear that devotees, they think, oh, Gaur Nitai is kind of ordinary. We need Bal Gopal. We need Sri Sri Radha Krishna. We need Lagu Gopal. We need this, we need that. All right, but just understand that most senior Vaishnavas agree that the most effective deities for home worship are Sri Sri Gaur Nitai. And through them, everything comes. That is the most effective way in this age of Kali. So you can't do 7 artis a day and 2 dressings and 5 or 7 offerings. But what you can do is chant Hare Krishna in front of Sri Sri Gaur Nitai. And that way you get everything. So yes, life is much different in Sydney now than it was in India 100 years ago. Although that's changing very rapidly. Those of you who go back to India or who have relatives who work in India know there's no such thing as work-life balance. That's an exotic concept. It's becoming the same way here in Australia as employers squeeze you tighter and tighter. I was talking to some devotees working in the corporate world. They told me they're remote workers. They only go into the office once a week, but the whole day is filled with online meetings. And then at 5 p.m., at the supposed end of the workday, that's when you get a chance to do your own work. It never ends. It's weekends and filled up with work. So this is what the working world's becoming like. And as people become more and more desperate for employment, they'll have to settle for this. So how can they do elaborate deity worship at home unless they're very fortunate to have adequate resources, allowing so much time? But still, you can have Sri Sri Gaur Nitai at home, offer your food to them, chant before them, gather the whole family for a short kirtan before them. So remember, this is why Srila Prabhupada in Nectar Devotion, when it comes to one of the 5 angas of Bhakti, deity worship, he's talking about deity worship at home. So if you want to be saved from clubs, cinemas, and dancing parties, whatever the contemporary equivalent of that is, you want to be saved from social media, if you want to be saved from the internet, then all such nonsense will be forgotten if one stresses the worship of the deities at home. So Rupa Goswami is going to give you a very provocative incentive, motivation. He says, and he's written this verse himself, "My dear friend, if you still have any desire to enjoy the company of your friends within this material world, then don't look upon the form of Krishna, who is standing on the bank of Keshika. He is known as Govinda, and his eyes are very enchanting. He's playing upon his flute, and on his head there is a peacock feather, and his whole body is illuminated by the moonlight in the sky. So he said, don't do it. If you want to be attached to mundane relationships, don't go see Krishna. This is a very artistic way of condemning what should be praised and praising what should be condemned. It sounds like he's praising mundane association, but actually he's just glorifying Krishna in a reverse way. If you're at all attached to these things, I don't advise that you look at Krishna. I don't advise that you go see Krishna. Don't see his form. You'll forget about all those things you're attached to, and you don't want to do that. Furthermore, when we discuss hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, we should understand that Bhagavatam is very mystical. By mystical, I mean that your immersion and realization that you get from Bhagavatam depends on what your motivation is. As you approach Bhagavatam, which is the literary incarnation of Krishna, Bhagavatam reciprocates with you. So, in other words, Srimad Bhagavatam is state-specific. According to your state of consciousness, when you read it, that's what you can understand. So, the Bhagavatam experience will be different for different persons. You may be a great academic scholar, but that doesn't mean you can enter into the mysteries of Bhagavatam. You may recall a verse from the first canto of Bhagavatam. Vasudeva kata ruchi san mahat sevaya vipra. By mahat seva, by rendering service to the great devotee, you get a taste. Ruchi, you get the taste for Vasudeva Kata. Talks about Vasudeva, talks about the Supreme Personality of God. So this sounds strange to the mundane mind. What does it matter whether I serve something or someone or not? I've got my intellect, I've got my master's degree. I'm a powerful IT walla. If I can understand so many IT intricacies, why can't I understand Bhagavatam? But no, Bhagavatam is spiritual substance of the highest order. So what does Rupa Goswami say in order to provoke you to approach Bhagavatam properly? He says, and I'm paraphrasing, "Oh, foolish idiot! You have heard Srimad Bhagavatam, and now you're not paying any more attention to mundane activities. How could you have done this? You're a fool. You've heard Srimad Bhagavatam, and now you've slackened your grip on all mundane activities. What's happening?" In other words, if you want to slacken your grip on mundane activities, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, you're very intelligent. But he's saying it in a very ornamental, fascinating way. So he's emphasizing, seeing the Sri Murti of Radha and Krishna is to forget endeavors for material association. Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam means you'll forget even Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Ordinary religion as Dharma, economic development as Artha, Kama, sense gratification, and you'll even forget about Moksha, liberation. Because, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Prema Pamartho Mahan, love of Krishna is the fifth category, beyond even moksha, beyond even liberation. So Srimad Bhagavatam tells you right in the very beginning, it's sweeping out anything other than the desire to please Krishna. Dharma projita kaitavota, paramo namatsaranam satam. The Bhagavatam is for those who are pure in heart, who don't even hanker for liberation, for freedom from material existence. They're just hankering to please Krishna. So Bhagavatam sweeps out all of these extraneous motivations, even though they're in the Vedas, because Bhagavatam is the conclusion of the Vedas. The Bhagavatam is focused on pure love of Krishna, beyond material religiosity for material gain, beyond economic development, beyond sense gratification, and even beyond moksha, liberation. Sadhu Sangha, association with devotees. Nectar of Devotion encourages you to associate with devotees who are favorable to your spiritual advancement. Because there can be neophyte devotees who, in the name of Bhakti, encourage material activities. And that's not good. That kind of association is not good for your development in pure devotional service. This is a sensitive point because we don't want to be rude to anyone. We don't want to be harsh to anyone. At the same time, while respecting even someone who just chants Hare Krishna and has no good achar, has no good behavior, because they're chanting in your mind, you respect them. But when it comes to rubbing shoulders with someone, associating with someone, you want inspiring association that will uplift you. So it's your responsibility as an individual devotee to somehow or other arrange for yourself inspiring association. You'll become like whom you associate with. So yes, there are so many different levels of devotees with differing degrees of commitment, but while respecting all, it is your responsibility to be selective when it comes for inspiration. And I think many of you have the experience of your spiritual life accelerating because you were very discriminating about your association. Yes, you would respect all, but when it comes to revealing your mind, opening your heart, inquiring about what can accelerate your bhakti and what can impede your bhakti, you want the kind of association that can motivate you properly and shine a light ahead of you so you can see where you're going. In other words, Sadhu Sangha doesn't mean just a social club for discussing mundane things, investment opportunities, visas, how to pass the English test. Those are practical necessities, but they are not related to Sadhu Sangha. And Mahaprabhu elsewhere in Chaitanya Charitamrita said, Lavamatra, just a fraction of a second with a real sadhu can bring about all perfection in your life. So that's how crucial association with devotees is. So again, remember our theme, Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Sri Muktira, what's next? Mathura. Oh, Mathura Vasa Sri Muktira, Shradaya Seva. These 5 things are what you're after in ever-increasing quantities, because this is what forms the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, these 5 activities. So the more, as we said, your individual life is full of these 5 things, these 5 items, the more successful in bhakti you are. So much so that even just focusing on one can bring you such great success. What to speak of connection with all 5. And ISKCON gives you opportunity for all 5. That's Srila Prabhupada's genius. A multinational entity advocating, presenting, facilitating the 5 most potent forms of devotional service. I want to leave some time for any questions. We're going to see how far we get today. We have an ambitious agenda, but this afternoon I definitely want you to hear about the relationship between Lord Chaitanya and Rupa Goswami, and maybe we'll get to Sanatana Goswami also, so that you see where all this is coming from. What are the dynamics of the relationship? How does Lord Chaitanya relate to Rupa Goswami? How does he give him this knowledge? How does Rupa Goswami receive it? So I'd like to give that background information from Chaitanya Charitamrita. And another reason why I like to refer to Chaitanya Charitamrita is so that you will have it in your home. How many of you have a set of Srimad Bhagavatam in your home? Raise your hands. All right. Now, how many of you have Chaitanya Charitamrita in your home? A little less. Okay, better than I thought. Very good. All right, do we have any questions thus far? Yes.
Hare Krishna Gurudev. You mentioned during the talk that to approach Srimad Bhagavatam, we have to have purity.
To get the full benefit.
Yeah, okay. So my question was, we do have Srimad Bhagavatam, and because you instruct us, we're trying to read all, and I'll speak for myself, definitely no purity. So how do we reconcile the two then?
Keep reading with an attitude that you're begging Krishna, please grant me insight into this non-material literature, this literary incarnation of you. And gradually, by your reading of Bhagavatam, you'll make spiritual advancement. There'll be things you don't understand. There'll be things you think you understand, but don't. And gradually, as you progress through the cantos, you're preparing for the smiling face of Krishna, which is the 10th canto. That's the objective of the first 9 cantos, to get you ready for Krishna Leela. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Everything very nice. So my question is, you mentioned about Sadhu Sangha, Non-Kirtan, Bhagavad Shravan, everything. Very nice, everything nice. My question is, so while we want to maintain our mood, proper mood, while reading Bhagavatam, while hearing Bhagavatam, while chanting, while associating with devotees, and while taking darshan of the deities, we want to maintain our mood, but something happens and mood goes off. So my question is, how can we maintain our mood while doing this ongoing?
That's why we're having this discussion, so that you focus on increasing your bhakti wealth. Focusing on these 5 activities, how to increase the quality of your engagement with them, will provide such benefits you can't imagine. especially as you become more and more aware of offenses. Because as we heard, even a person who has no faith, no understanding of these 5 potent activities, but doesn't make offenses, that person can advance in love of Krishna. What to speak of someone who has faith in these activities? Yes, this is my wealth, this is my life and soul, these 5 activities, pancha anga. So that's why we're having this seminar, so that you know what your real wealth is and how to increase it. And remember what we explained in the beginning. We're not dealing with religious belief here. We're not dealing with just empty traditions or superficial traditions. We are dealing with the life and soul of Bhakti, these 5 angas. So if you want to increase your Bhakti, how do you do it? By more believing? No. By more quantitative and qualitative immersion in these 5 activities.
Thank you, Your Holiness. Does the devotional service increase faith as well?
Yes, because the more you engage in service, the more you get realization, experience. And the more experience and realization you get, the more you want to engage in devotional service. That's why you heard Rupa Goswami's verse. If you're at all interested in mundane society, friendship, and love, don't go see Govinda. Stay away from Gopinath. You'll forget all about your mundane goals. Obviously, he's recommending the opposite. Yes, forget your mundane goals by going to see Gopinath. Got it?
Chanting
Please use the mic.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, thanks a lot for your valuable association and the beautiful Krishna Katham. You mentioned how it's important to worship Deity at home, Gauravitai. And my question is that I can see that in this hall there are a lot of Indian devotees, and I know that some of them are so lucky that they came from a very high standard of life, and some of devotees from India even have never meet in their life because of Brahman culture. But in Western countries, people who are even worse than Shudra come to Krishna consciousness because of mercy of Srila Prabhupada. And you have been in Russia many times and in Ukraine, and you know that sometimes one family member is devotee, but his partner or her partner eat meat or breaks principles, something else. And my question is it Deity Aparadha to invite Gauranitai for that place where one person or, for example, 2 family members are devotees, but there is still meat in that place?
Gauranitai accepts no offenses. As far as your description of the effects of the age of Kali, it's everywhere these days. I was speaking a few days ago about how at the new airport in Calcutta, when I would go to the gate to wait for the plane to arrive, I could usually go upstairs and there was nothing upstairs and I could chant japa. Does anyone remember Calcutta Airport when it was like that? What's upstairs now? 4 pubs. The Irish pub, the German pub. So that was the end of my japa sanctuary. So the age of Kali is everywhere. If you're flying on Air India from Calcutta to Mumbai or Delhi, or flying on Vistara, whatever, Indigo, you know what happens when the flight attendant comes around and says, veg or non-veg? Everyone knows what happens, right? So many persons so proudly, non-veg. So the age of Kali is everywhere. And as far as worshiping Gaura-Nitai in a setting where not everyone is practicing bhakti, well, you don't want to, even though Gaura-Nitai don't take offenses, you don't want to encourage persons to offend. So you keep those deities in your room or something like that. But the fact is, Gaura-Nitai don't accept this offenses. Look at Nityananda and Jagai Madai. You had a question. That'll be the last one before we break, because we don't want to hold up prasadam.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So regarding the point Nama Kirtana, so it's both chanting and Kirtana, what exactly? Regarding Nama Kirtana.
It means japa as well as kirtan.
So both are equally.
Both are nama kirtan.
They are equally important.
Uh,
They are equally important, Japa and Kirtan.
both are important. You must chant your japa if you're an initiated devotee, and then an initiated devotee loves to participate in kirtan. Kirtan can refer to not simply music, it can refer to speaking about Krishna, writing about Krishna. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Sharon's ready in 10 minutes. One more question.
All right, one more question. I've been told that prasadam will be ready in 10 minutes. I know no one is interested.
Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much. This is the beautiful class from the nectar of all. So I want, you mentioned like Dham Basi, like Mathura Basi. So how long can we stay in Dham?
You can make your own home a dham if you are so Krishna conscious, like Bhakti Vinod Thakur. I always point out how Bhakti Vinod Thakur shows the peak potential of converting your home into a holy dham. He talks about it in his song, Shuddha Bhakata Charanarenu Bhajana Anukula. He describes how one evening he was doing arti to his deities in his home, and his whole house turned into Goloka Vrindavan. Now, of course, Bhakti Vinod Thakur is no ordinary person. Still, he's showing you the potential in bhakti. And we'll talk about that in our next session, how you might think these descriptions of extraordinary bhakti are exaggerations that have no relevance for you. We'll talk about that in the afternoon. But my point is that yes, the potential is there to make your own home a spiritual abode. And then I describe how Srila Prabhupada pointed out that those who are absorbed in service at the mandir, they're not in Melbourne or Sydney. They're in even what is beyond Vaikuntha. They're in Goloka Vrindavan because they're simply thinking how to satisfy Krishna. If they're thinking in that way, to whatever extent, to that extent they're in the spiritual world. So the spiritual world is not physical geography. It's not restricted by physical geography, shall we say. It is all about your consciousness. This is the principle of Vrindavan everywhere. Okay?
Hi, Guru. I just got one question. I'm very pleased that you actually covered the deity worship very thoroughly today, because it's one of my biggest concerns when I worship Radha Gopina at home. Do you think it's more advisable for me to actually move Radha Gopina aside and install Gonitai for worshiping?
Let me answer in another way. That you don't have to have the brass deities. You can have a picture. There's nothing deficient about a picture. You can have a picture of Panchatattva, a picture of Sri Sri Gaurnitai. You could have the forms of Gaurnitai and a picture of Radha Gopinath. But we should be more aware that Radha Krishna worship is very high. Radha Krishna worship accepts no offenses. Excuse me, it doesn't tolerate offenses. It accepts all offenses. That's why, as many of you know, in the temple, we worship Radha and Krishna according to the standard of Lakshmi Narayan in Vaikuntha, awe and reverence. Whereas Radha Krishna worship is actually ragamar, spontaneous. Just like Sanatana Goswami used to keep his Radha Krishna deities in a tree. And he was a beggar, mendicant, so he would just offer the deity what he could, which was often just dry chapatis with no salt. And so one day the deity spoke to him, his Radha Krishna deities in the tree. Can you at least put some salt on the chapatis? And Sanatana Goswami replied, well, if I start endeavoring to get salt, then it will lead to endeavoring to get ghee, and then this and that. The other will go on and on and on. Please, this is the best I can do. Please accept. And Krishna accepted. That's Ragamar. Don't imitate. So there's no harm in your adding Gaurnitai to your home altar.
So if we make any offenses, Gonitai will override Radha. Hare Krishna.
How are we doing for prasad?
2 minutes. Any last question? Yeah. Is there any last question?
Way over here to the left.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thanks so much for this beautiful lesson. I have a question about chanting. Like when I chant, sometimes I believe that I am going into a different world. Like there are some powers that I feel while I'm in the natural world. So like when you chant, you believe you have something, powers coming from somewhere you don't know. But the point is, when you come back to the original world, this material world, those powers keep on diminishing step by step. So the point is how to maintain those powers after chanting while working within this material world, so that you can maintain a balance. So like
Chanting is simply for engaging in Krishna's service. You don't want mystic powers.
no, it's like not mystic power. That's what I believe, that I'm getting some source of energy or something. to do?
Chanting is simply for pleasing Krishna. Oh Krishna, please engage me in your service. You appeal to Krishna, you appeal to the internal energy of Krishna. Please engage me in your service. That's all that chanting is about. Still, if you want to chant for material benefit, that's better than not chanting at all. If you want wealth, if you want health, if you want psychic powers, still go ahead and chant Hare Krishna. Okay?
It's not about material benefits. It's about like you need to live around with the people. You need to keep in contact with them. Do the
Yes, I certainly know
Yeah.
that.
it's
But I'm telling you that the proper chanting is simply for service. You're asking, give me, please. You can't demand. You say, my dear Krishna, if you so desire, please grant me devotional service. Now, to get to that point may take some time. So in the beginning, we may be chanting for material benefit. But go on chanting, and you'll become purified. So I'm glad that you are starting to chant Hare Krishna. You are the best among human beings. But there's a lot more for you to have. All right?
alright. Thanks.
Hare Krishna. So you remember our theme, Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan. What's next? Bhagavatam Shravan. Mathura Vasa, Srimad Shradaya Seva. These 5 limbs, angas of bhakti, are, as we said previously, difficult to understand with our material intelligence. You may think that these 5 activities are just tradition or just some religious rituals, but that is a great mistake. So remember, bhakti is not about belief. If I ask you, sometimes I do this, how many of you believe in Krishna? Raise your hand. And what do I say to that? So what? Because bhakti is not about belief. It is about your engagement of your senses, your mind, and your body in authorized spiritual activities. And by your doing that, a transformation is produced in your consciousness. In fact, your whole body can become spiritualized. You know the example. The iron rod is not fire, but if it's inserted in fire and kept there, it can act like fire. So our bodies are not spiritual, but by engaging them in Krishna's service, our bodies have the potential to become spiritualized. That is why someone who is fully engaged in devotional service is not considered to be a resident of the material world, even though they have a material body and they're in the material world. Their whole existence has become spiritualized by engagement, full engagement in devotional service. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Mapcha yoga vicharena, bhakti yogena sevate, sagunan samatityayitan, brahma bhuyaya kalpate. For one who is fully engaged 24/7 in Krishna's service, the modes of material nature cannot bind, cannot affect such a person, such a devotee. We talked about sadhu sangha and how we should search for inspiring association while respecting anyone who vibrates the name Krishna. But what do you do when you find inspiring association? You want to hear about Krishna and talk about Krishna. That's your response to the inspiration. By your wanting to talk about Krishna, hear about Krishna, discuss Krishna's service, you properly take advantage of the sadhu sangha. So sadhu sangha is an interactive, it's not just a one-way street. And it's your responsibility to make sure the street is a two-way street. And then you're properly participating in sadhu sangha. So what shall we discuss further today? Exaggeration. This is a point that Srila Prabhupada raises in chapter 13 of Nectar Devotion. Knowing our mentality. That we hear about these stunning one-off occurrences of persons becoming extraordinarily advanced just by doing one bhakti activity one time. The four Kumaras, they smelled the incense in the temple and became totally transformed. So we might think, can that really be true? Doesn't happen to anyone I know. But these descriptions, although not possible for them to happen to everyone, do happen to some. So you would say, well, then why mention it? Just like Bilva Mangala Thakur. How many of you know the story of Bilva Mangala Thakur? Yes. He was fallen. Although born in a Brahmana family, he was fallen. So much so that he was associating with a night worker. And he would go through hell and high water to be with the night worker. Even though he was born in a Brahmin family with a nice Brahmini wife, he had this attachment for this night worker. And once he, through a horrible storm, cyclone, went at night to meet her. Raging storm. He had to cross a flooded river, and he thought, let me grab onto this log, and that will bring me to the other side. The log turned out to be a dead body. He didn't care. He had his goal in mind. He got to the house of the night worker whose name was Chintamani. And the gate was locked. The house was surrounded by a big wall with a gate, and the gate was locked. And no one would open the gate. So he decided, let me hold on to some vines and climb over the wall. He did that, but the vines turned out to be a snake. He didn't care. He was so determined. And so then, once inside the courtyard, and he gained access, the night worker Chintamani was shocked to see him. How could you come out at during such a cyclone, during such a natural disturbance, storm? You still determined to be with me? And she looked at him and said, you know, if only you were so determined to attain Krishna, your life would be successful. And a bell rang in Bilva Mangala Thakur's head. Krishna, if only I was so determined as I am to be with this night worker, if only I was so determined to be with Krishna, my life would be successful. So he immediately took off for Vrindavan. And there in Vrindavan, he had the darshan of Krishna. So we hear things like that and wonder, well, what about me? Why are these accounts, these histories there, cited in Nectar of Devotion, when it's not happening to any of us? But these histories, these incidents, are necessary for showing us the peak potential of bhakti. And by hearing these incidents, our attention is dragged away from the material world. So still you may say, our attention is dragged away, yes, but still these things won't happen to us. They don't happen to us. Like for Nama Kirtan, chanting Hare Krishna, the incident is given that someone just heard once the vibration of the strings and Narada Muni's Veena and lost all attraction for material existence. So again, you're thinking, well, that would be so wonderful to happen to me. But it's not. It's not happening to anyone I know. So therefore, why are these incidents mentioned? But they're showing you, these incidents are showing you what is possible at the peak potential of bhakti. But if you can just get one drop of that ocean of peak potential, how fortunate your life is. And we're going to discuss Rupa Goswami and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in terms of getting one drop of that mercy. For those of you who are reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, there it's stated that it's not possible to describe the length and breadth of the bhakti ocean. But if you just get one drop of that ocean, that one drop can drown the whole universe. So we have to put things into perspective. Yes, Nectar of Devotion describes the peak potential of the bhakti activities. But if you can just get a drop of that peak potential, your whole life is wonderful. So please understand that point. Another aspect that we should be clear about is the relation between bhakti activities and our regular occupational and social duties, which are still, the remnants are still present in India and Indian culture today in terms of marriage, in terms of social obligations, in terms of your occupational responsibilities. So is that bhakti? Or is that leading to bhakti? Let us be clear. No. The panchangas, the 5 limbs, are beyond the material realm. Social duties, occupational duties, can make you settle, make you peaceful, so that then you can appreciate bhakti. But bhakti is its own cause. I think some of you have heard the so-called mantra, work is worship, duty is God. How many know that mantra? Sometimes, even in Vrindavan, when there are some rallies, people are marching in the streets, they're chanting like that. Work is worship, duty is God. What do you think? Because anybody who's working, they're worshiping. And anyone who is doing whatever they call their duty, that's God. This is a leftover understanding from Varnashrama Dharma, in which as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, someone performing their occupational duty properly can attain perfection, because that occupational duty and social duty settles them and keeps them stable, so that one day they can peacefully hear about Bhakti. But Bhakti is its own cause and its own result. So I don't think that anyone here is marching in the streets chanting, work is worship, duty is God. But there may be traces of such notions in your consciousness. I hear it often. Swamiji, right now, we cannot engage in Krishna service. We must do our duty. Have any of you heard that one? Yeah. I'm working. I'm an honest working man. Swamiji, you know what Lord Krishna says? Work is worship. What other excuses can be there? Swamiji, Bhakti, devotional service, is for when you're in your 70s and 80s. But when you are younger, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that's the time for making money. And then in the last days of your life, then Jai Shri Krishna. What do you think? So this notion that work is worship, duty is God, may not be present so vividly, but subtly it can be there. Let me immerse myself in my occupational duties, my family responsibilities. That will lead to bhakti. No, only bhakti leads to bhakti. That means contact with a devotee brings about bhakti. So this is an important point to understand, so that we can better appreciate the panchanga, the 5 limbs of devotional service. And the descriptions of what can happen, extraordinary events that can happen to someone who some or other engages in devotional service. These are not exaggerations. It can happen. So why should we deny that? It's not happening to us. But just like a mundane example, who here is going to the university? Anyone? 1. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. You are working hard to get your degree, yes? You're studying, very attentive about exams, yes? Yes. This Mataji, she wants to be a chartered accountant, is that it? Yes. So, but it is a fact, though, that some persons get honorary degrees, right? It happens. So you don't deny that, but you don't expect one, do you? But it does happen. So similarly, in Nectar Devotion, you see that sudden transformations, like the Devamrita Thakur. He just heard these words from this night worker, Chintamani. All he heard was her say, if you would only be so attached to Krishna as you are to my temporary material body, your life would be successful. Dum. Off he went to Vrindavan. Later, he wrote a prayer glorifying this night worker as his Vartma Pradarshika Guru, the Guru who first showed him the path. So these events can happen, just like someone can get an honorary degree from the university. But practically every student will not expect an honorary degree. We've discussed briefly Murti Seva and the importance of having home deities, even though there's so little time in our daily life available. But just chanting in front of your home altar, and doesn't have to be brass forms of the deities, you can have a picture there. Just chanting in that way, in a sacred space in your own home. And I hope you have a sacred space in your home. Is so effective. So that's why, as we said this morning, Srila Prabhupada is talking not about mandir worship, but about home puja. So we talked about Murti Seva, we talked about Nama Kirtan, we talked about Sadhu Sangha and Bhagavat Shravan, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Is that all five? Oh, Mathura Vasa. Yes. Going to a holy place associated with Krishna, Lord Chaitanya. You feel the difference as soon as you arrive in the place. Even a non-devotee can feel the difference. But we talked about how there's no geographic restriction to Vrindavan consciousness. Lord Chaitanya himself demonstrates this. Moramana Vrindavan. His mind is Vrindavan because he's always thinking of the pastimes of Krishna. So there's no geographic restriction to Vrindavan. Still, that physical tract of land is very special. And even a non-devotee who visits there can feel something. Even just by your remembering the holy Dham, Vrindavan, Navadvip, Jagannath Puri, just by remembering you feel different. What to speak of by being there? Some of you can remember your first visit to the Dham. Yes. How was it? What do you remember?
It was Jagannath Puri.
Huh?
It was Jagannath Puri.
Yes.
I saw so my first visit in Kham was in Jagannath Puri, and I remember Lord Jagannath Prasadam. And no, the Prasadam is Mahaprasadam from the Lord each day.
So you cannot forget that first taste of Jagannath Prasad.
It was very special, and they didn't allow me to come inside temple because I'm a white body, and it's not allowed to white people enter the temple. And
You have to look like you were born in a Hindu family. But there's a way.
I just felt the mercy of Srila
Yeah.
Prabhupada.
I waited until Rath Yatra, when the Rath Yatra carts in Puri would spend the night, would be parked at the Gundicha Mandir. And so, right at dawn, myself, Holiness Radhanath Swami, and some other devotees, we had an arrangement with the pandas that at dawn they would allow us to climb up the cart and approach Lord Jagannath and put our head at his lotus feet. So we did that. And I remember one of the guards, as we climbed up the cart, and got to the platform, he looked at us. He looked at Radhanath Swami and me and said, "Iskan." And we just looked like, what does that mean? So we just kept walking. We didn't say anything. Then there was a European devotee with us, and they stopped him. And he pulled out 5,000 rupees, gave it to the guard, and he was through. So then we got to put our head at the lotus feet of Jagannath, the Pujari, put our heads at Lord Jagannath's lotus feet. So my point is that everyone can remember something extraordinary that happens during your visit to Vrindavan, Mayapur, Navadvip, Jagannath Puri. And so you can appreciate how living in the Dham, visiting the Dham is one of the Panchangas, the 5 limbs. But then we talked about how being absorbed in Mandir Seva, even here in North Sydney, is a special situation. And your Krishna consciousness can be such that you can realize you're in Vrindavan because you're always thinking, how can Krishna be satisfied? That is Vrindavan, that attitude. So I wanted to impart to you a feeling of personalism, because this whole presentation by Rupa Goswami in Nectar Devotion, which I hope you will all read. Those of you who are not studying Bhakti Shastri have not read it, probably. But everything is personal in Bhakti. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the devotees. So, we spoke about the correlation, the connectivity between Lord Chaitanya and Rupa Goswami. And if we have time, we'll discuss about Sanatan Goswami, because Rupa and Sanatan would collaborate. So how did Rupa Goswami get all that knowledge of Bhakti? It came directly from Lord Chaitanya, who spoke to him for 10 days straight at Prayag. So let's go to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is Madhya Lila chapter 19, text 1. Broken. Oh, now I'm told. All right. I'll have to read it to you, which means you have to pay special attention. Vrindavaniyam rasakeli vardam kalena luptam nijashaktim mukha sanchaya rupe yatanot punasa prabhur vijal pradiva loka trishtim. Please listen carefully. Before the creation of this cosmic manifestation, the Lord enlightened the heart of Lord Brahma with the details of the creation and manifested the Vedic knowledge. So everyone knows about that from beginning of Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, or even 1st canto, 1st verse. Tene Brahma Hida Yad Adi Kavaye. Describing how Lord Brahma, who is Adi Kavi, the original intellectual of the universe, was inspired through his heart with Vedic knowledge. So this verse is referencing that, but in relation to Rupa Goswami. We'll continue to read. In exactly the same way, the Lord, being anxious to revive the Vrindavan pastimes of Lord Krishna, impregnated the heart of Rupa Goswami with spiritual potency. By this potency, Srila Rupa Goswami could revive the activities of Krishna in Vrindavan, activities almost lost to memory. In this way, he spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world. So you have the example of Lord Brahma, and now you have the example of Rupa Goswami, both in the same way being taught through the heart. And just hear the situation. The Vrindavan pastimes were almost lost to the world's knowledge. Remember in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains, Sakalinaham Mahata Yoganashta Parantapaha. I spoke this knowledge previously to the chief executive of the sun planet, but in the course of time, the knowledge has become lost. He didn't mean that the verses or the texts become lost. He meant the clear meaning, the proper understanding had become lost. And so therefore Krishna re-energized the parampara. Krishna did that himself. Similarly, we have a situation a little more than 500 years ago where knowledge and awareness of Krishna's pastimes, his Vrindavan pastimes, had disappeared. So Krishna himself, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is reviving the emphasis on Krishna Lila. As we heard, the Lord, being anxious to revive the Vrindavan pastimes of Lord Krishna, impregnated the heart of Rupa Goswami with spiritual potency. So this is the Rupa Goswami who originated the knowledge you have in Nectar of Devotion, which is Srila Prabhupada's summary study of Rupa Goswami's work, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's very personal, isn't it? By this activity, Srila Rupa Goswami could revive the activities of Krishna in Vrindavan, activities almost lost to memory. It happens in the material world. Things disappear. Whether the actual meaning of Bhagavad Gita, so Krishna had to re-speak it, or knowledge of Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes, almost lost to memory. So Rupa Goswami gets the credit for revitalizing, reviving Vrindavan Leela in the consciousness of the world. And that's why we are known as Rupa Nugas, followers of Rupa Goswami. Any questions about that? It's a very personal reality. And here you have Lord Chaitanya revealing to Rupa Goswami Krishna's intimate pastimes. Yes.
Can I just ask a question from the previous session?
Well, I was looking for questions right now. There'll be a time at the end. Okay, save it, please. I was wanting to focus on this personal relationship between Lord Chaitanya, who's Krishna himself, and Rupa Goswami. So you can see where your knowledge, where this bhakti process is coming from. It's not anything invented by me or Srila Prabhupada or any recent person. Just as Krishna's Leelas, his pastimes are eternal, similarly, knowledge of Krishna's pastimes is eternal. But sometimes the situation can appear that the knowledge has become lost. And at that time, Krishna does something about it personally. So I would like to emphasize this so that you feel indebted. So that you feel that you are the recipients, the receivers of such mercy because of Srila Rupa Goswami being instructed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself.
Gurudev, you mentioned the Bhagavad Gita verse Sakalaneha Mahato, that this knowledge gets lost due to time. And that although Bhakti and its knowledge and Krishna's pastimes are eternal, they look or appear to be lost, but at the same time the Lord is anxious to revive them. Is this, on one side, there's something inside me saying, well, is this a fault of the devotees who didn't spread it enough? But we can't say that because they're pure and they're full.
It's the fault of the material world, which we are so attached to.
So does that mean the material energy is over?
Seems to, just like clouds seem to cover the sun, but the sun is always shining above the clouds. Seems that way. Krishna is showing you how powerful the illusory energy is. The knowledge almost becomes lost. But Krishna always does something about it. Yada yada hidharmasya ganya bhavati. Okay? This is personalism. This is why you should feel personally indebted. So Rupa Goswami revived the Vrindavan pastimes, meaning people had almost forgot about them. But Rupa Goswami has given us the knowledge in Nectar of Devotion, which Srila Prabhupada has presented.
Hi Krishna Maharaj. I want to ask about the cause of bhakti, because you are explaining how bhakti is not caused by our adherence to social rules or duty. So could you explain a little bit more about the cause?
The cause is bhakti itself, and that means contact with the devotee. Properly following your varnashramic occupational and social duties can make the ground fertile, but it doesn't automatically translate into the seed of bhakti sprouting. It's kind of like this. It's not a one-to-one relationship, causal. Okay, I've done my social duties, I've done my occupational duties so nicely. That is bhakti. No, but it could be so that you're doing your duties nicely, gives you a pious life, a goodly life, and in other words, makes the ground fertile, so that when you do meet a devotee and can get the seed of bhakti, the bhakti lata bij, the experience is fruitful. But no, there is no one-to-one correlation between your occupational and social duties and the seed of bhakti. So I bring that up because many people think that just by doing my family duties, my work duties, that is worship. That is all that needs to be done. Vishnu is satisfied by that. Brahma, Durga, Shiva, whoever. You're all satisfied. Take your pick. But that is not the case. So yes, thank you for asking that question, because the answer needs to be emphasized. Even though we laugh when we hear about the pseudo mantra, work is worship, duty is God, there are traces in our consciousness of that. Yes, Kamsari Sena. Both Sena brothers are here. Srikanta Sena and Kamsari Sena.
Guru, I just going back to the point you were mentioning about how we were Rupa Nugas, we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita also there are extensive teachings that Lord Chaitanya has given to Srila Sanatana Goswami as well. So the question is, why are we specifically known as Rupa Nugas, that followers of Rupa Goswami?
Rupa Goswami considered Sanatana Goswami to be his spiritual master. It's just that Rupa Goswami has given the foundational knowledge of what you read in Nectar of Devotion, and also, yes, knowledge of rasa. So that doesn't mean Sanatana Goswami is diminished. But Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Dhamayam Nati Swapadantikam. We pray to Rupa Goswami because he is foundational in terms of, and we'll hear more of this. I'm just about to read more of the personalism between Lord Chaitanya and Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami is credited by Lord Chaitanya himself with actual understanding of Krishna's intimate leelas and Lord Chaitanya's feelings of separation. Lord Chaitanya in the role of Krishna and Radha, particularly in feeling Radharani's separation from Krishna.
Thank you. Thanks.
So we have no projectors. Suddenly it was revived. Is there a miracle? Huh? It's kaput. Okay. All right, you'll have to pay special attention. Maybe this is all mercy, so you have to hear with more concentration. So we're looking at Majlila chapter 19, text 133. And of course, I'm always motivated to inspire you to become attached to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. I often point out, and many of you may have heard me say it, the reason why there is such confusion in India about Krishna is because they don't approach Krishna through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And without going through Mahaprabhu in the age of Kali, it's practically impossible to clearly understand Krishna. You've heard it before. Why did he do this in Battle Kurukshetra? He cheated Karna. Why did he do this? Why? Who is he dancing with? Who are you dancing with? This Krishna is this. Krishna did that. No understanding. Krishna is the Hindu forest love god. So much confusion because they don't go through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So therefore, I'm always inspired to motivate you to read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. How many have read the whole Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, 10 out of how many are here? 10 out of 125. But I think many of you have the full set of Chaitanya Charitamrita in your home, yes? But, well, that is the first step. But it's not the culmination. The culmination is to read it.
It's actually quite difficult to comprehend. Maybe we need your guidance. Because you're an expert in it.
Well, I'm speaking something now, hopefully. It'll help you. It'll inspire you to open the books. Okay, text 133. Srila Rupa Goswami has personally spoken about the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his auspicious introduction to his book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So before beginning Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which you have as Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami credits the mercy of Mahaprabhu. What is that introduction, that verse? that auspicious introduction? Listen. Although I am the lowest of men and have no knowledge, the inspiration to write transcendental literatures about devotional service has been mercifully bestowed upon me. Therefore, I am offering my obeisances at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has given me the chance to write these books. So he's truly feeling wretched. I'm the lowest. I have no knowledge, but I'm getting some inspiration bestowed upon me from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He has given me the chance to write these books. So he's personally expressing his indebtedness, his own personal worthlessness, and he's giving all the credit to the inspiration coming from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So as I explained to you, for 10 days, Rupa Goswami instructed Rupa Goswami. By that instruction, you see, it's not simply do this, do that, this is the way it is, that's the way it is. Through those words, Mahaprabhu is empowering Rupa Goswami with the necessary potency to describe and enhance upon what Lord Chaitanya is speaking. So this is how the parampara works. This is how the chain of disciple succession works. There's empowerment. Yes, there's the handing down of information, but there's also accompanying that information is the potency to understand it and to convey it to others. I want to emphasize this so that you can appreciate the personalism, because we're so impersonal. Nirvishesha shunyavadi, pashtata deshatar. So Prabhupada wants you to know in the purport that unless one is specifically empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he cannot spread the Krishna consciousness movement. An empowered devotee sees and feels himself to be the lowest of men, for he knows that whatever he does is due to the inspiration given by the Lord in the heart. So there you're having an example of what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Tesham satayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti. Krishna says, for those who are constantly engaged in my service with priti, with love, I personally give them the intelligence. How to come to me, how to serve me. This is the epitome, the utmost personalism. And that's how the ultimate reality works. Krishna is pleased by his devotee and empowers his devotee. An interesting point about Rupa Goswami, especially when we consider the casteism that has caused so much confusion in India. You know, the concoction of Brahmana by birth. Rupa Goswami was a Brahmana by birth, but his days before manifesting as a Krishna Bhakta were as an associate of Muslims. So we hear that. The material position of a devotee doesn't matter, because devotional service is not dependent on material considerations. In his earlier life, Srila Rupa Goswami was a government officer and a grihasta. He was not even a brahmachari or sannyasi. He associated with mlechas and yavanas, but because he was always eager to serve, he was a qualified recipient for the Lord's mercy. A sincere devotee can therefore be empowered by the Lord regardless of his situation. So you all understand the illusion of Brahmana by birth. Right? You know what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Guna Karma Vibhagasha. You're classified in your occupation, your varna, by your qualities and activities. Just like Srikanta Sain is a lawyer. Let's say in the future he and his wife have a son. Does that mean the son is automatically a lawyer? My father is Srikanta Sain. He's a lawyer, so automatically I'm a lawyer. No, you'll never sign him up. You'll never take him on. What's your qualification? Never mind your father. What about you? Well, simply my father is a lawyer. That's my qualification. So this concoction, as I've said many times, has caused such havoc in India. How many of you, in order to try and get a good mark on your exams in India, you went to the temple of Saraswati and paid some brahmanas? Raise your hands, be honest. You figure, you never know, it might work, right? All right, how much did you pay? 11 rupees. Good investment, you never know, right? 11 rupees, what the heck? And the so-called Brahmana was very happy to take your 11 rupees. So this is the kind of confusion that has caused havoc in India. But now you're hearing that Rupa Goswami was associated with the total non-Vedic persons, with Muslims, meat eaters, and yet he became a qualified recipient for Lord Chaitanya's mercy. So we continue. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "My dear Rupa, please listen to me. It is not possible to describe devotional service completely. Therefore, I'm just trying to give you a synopsis of the symptoms of devotional service." So what Lord Chaitanya is giving Rupa Goswami is just a summary. And he's asking Rupa Goswami, expand upon these kernels, these nuggets that I'm giving you. Because it's not possible for a complete description. Why is that? He explains in the next verse. The ocean of the transcendental mellows of devotional service, the ocean of rasa, is so big that no one can estimate its length and breadth. However, just to help you taste it, I am describing but one drop. But remember that one drop can drown the whole universe. So there's no limit to knowledge of Krishna's pastimes and loving relationships. The Lord Chaitanya himself, who's Krishna, says, it's not possible to describe the full expanse, but one drop. Just to help you taste the whole ocean, I'm giving you just one drop. So quantitatively, in terms of quantity, we can never know as much as Krishna. But if we just get one drop of that ocean, that is more than sufficient. Any questions about this? Microphone, please.
Maharaj, and this what you told earlier was people are not approaching Krishna via Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but even to approach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's such limited knowledge we have. And even if we go in Puranas or Bhagavatam, there's barely mention of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's incarnation, but there's one verse in Bhagavatam, if you know Bhagavatam, that you would come across or stumble upon it, then you're supposed to follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So why this avatar is such hidden gem?
Lord Chaitanya is known as Chana Avatar, the hidden incarnation, because his mission is confidential. You have things you hold in confidence. Maybe only your wife knows. So why can't Krishna? He's also a person. Why can't he have confidential things? He says in Bhagavad Gita, Raja Vidya, Raja Guya. This is the king of knowledge. This is the king of all secrets. This is part of being a person. You're selective about who you talk to. If some stranger walks up to you on the street and says, "Tell me, how did you feel when you first met your wife?" would you start talking? Okay. It's personal. And that person on the street has no qualification. He hasn't won your trust. He hasn't established any relationship with you. So Lord Chaitanya is on a very confidential mission. Yes, to distribute Harinam Sankirtan, but also to experience what it's like to be a devotee. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, but Krishna notices that his devotees enjoy more than he does. So Krishna says, all right, I'll come as my own devotee to taste what my devotees are tasting. And that way Krishna still remains the supreme enjoyer. So because Mahaprabhu is a person, he's Radha Krishna combined, he has things he holds in confidence, things that are confidential. That's part of being a person. You don't blab your business to everyone. You don't pick out some stranger here. I'd like to tell you how my mother treated me when I was a child. You don't do that. But maybe to your close persons, maybe to your wife, you would say such a thing. So we have to give credit to Krishna for being a person. We're so impersonal. We don't want Krishna to be a person. We have so many personal needs and personal ways of doing things. Why can't Krishna? Our personal needs are reality, but Krishna's personal existence, mythology. This is our envy. Anything else?
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Who hasn't asked a question before? All right, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a speculation, but I was immediately thinking how we approach Krishna via Lord Chaitanya. Wouldn't it make sense to read Chaitanya Charitamrita before approaching 10th canto?
No. Bhagavad Gita is the undergraduate study, the acharyas tell us. Bhagavatam is the graduate study, and Chaitanya Charitamrita is the postgraduate study. Chaitanya Charitamrita is actually Bhagavatam because there's so many Bhagavatam verses in it. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna introduces you to him. He says, think of me, offer to me, surrender to me. But he doesn't talk much about that me. Who is me? He doesn't reveal so much about his identity. He shows the universal form, the Virat Roop, but that's not the original personality of Godhead. In Bhagavatam, Krishna describes more about himself, especially in the 10th canto. He reveals his name, form, qualities, and pastimes in Srimad Bhagavatam. In Bhagavatam, however, you will practically not find a reference to Srimati Radharani. She's there in a hidden way. One word related to her name. Why did Shukadeva Goswami do like that? First of all, the subject matter of Srimati Radharani is very confidential. Secondly, he knew, the Acharyas say, that if he uttered Radha's name, he would lose himself in ecstasy and he wouldn't be able to speak Bhagavatam. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you find all about Radha Tattva, the science of Srimati Radharani, because that's the confidential mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to experience what Srimati Radharani experiences in her relationship with Krishna. Krishna wants to know, but he can't do that as Krishna. All right?
Thank you.
So let me read a little more about Rupa Goswami. This is Lord Chaitanya speaking. He's concluding, I have simply given a general survey describing the mellows of devotional service. You, Rupa Goswami, can consider how to adjust and expand this. Just see the responsibility conferred upon Rupa Goswami by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You can adjust and expand this knowledge. When one thinks of Krishna constantly, love for him manifests within the heart. Even though one may be ignorant, one can reach the far shore of the ocean of transcendental love by Lord Krishna's mercy. So after saying this, Mahaprabhu embraces Rupa Goswami, and then Mahaprabhu decides to move on in his travels to Varanasi. So the next morning, Mahaprabhu rises early and prepares to leave for Varanasi, and Rupa Goswami submits a petition at Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet. If you give me permission, I shall go with your lordship. It is not possible for me to tolerate the waves of separation. So what is Mahaprabhu's response? You can't blame Rupa Goswami for making such a proposition. But Mahaprabhu says, your duty is to carry out my order. You have come near Vrindavan, now you should go there. Later, you can go from Vrindavan to Jagannath Puri, and you'll meet me there in Jagannath Puri. So Mahaprabhu has service for Rupa Goswami to do in Vrindavan, reviving the knowledge of Vrindavan's pastimes. So then what? After Mahaprabhu said that, he embraced Rupa Goswami again, got into a boat, and Rupa Goswami faints and falls down at the spot, overwhelmed by the impending separation. This is real love. How many of you, upon separation from someone dear to you, fainted and fell down on the spot? We don't know what the waves of transcendental separation are like. Rupa Goswami was feeling that. He wanted to go with Mahaprabhu, but Mahaprabhu had service for Rupa Goswami to do. Most important service. And it's a service that we are all benefiting from now. So this is the background to Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada's summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. All right, now we'll open up for any general questions. Before we get to that, let me briefly explain that I wanted originally to talk about the 9 symptoms of bhava, ecstatic love, because the goal of the 5 angas, the special angas that we've been talking about, sadhu, sangha, nama, kirtan, and so forth, the goal is to produce ecstatic love for Krishna. We're not impersonalists. It's not that our whole portfolio of knowledge and realization is simply, you're not the body. Get rid of all material desires. We are aiming for ecstatic love of Krishna. And so therefore, it's important for us to know the symptoms of ecstatic love. The 5 angas lead to ecstatic love, but what are the symptoms of that stage of bhava? That you'll find in chapter 18 of Nectar of Devotion. The 9 symptoms are listed. And this is important because, especially in India, you can see persons who do these dramatic external displays of ecstasy. Maybe you've seen that during your visits to Vrindavan. I remember once I was at the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, right before the deities, and someone walked in and immediately started rolling on the ground. You've ever seen something like that? Yes. And a person without knowledge will think, oh, this could be a highly advanced sadhu. But what you read in Nectar Devotion equips you with handling such demonstrations. It's not about the displays of what's called the ashtasattvika, the 8 ecstatic bodily symptoms. Tears shooting from the eyes, trembling of the body. Someone can put on that kind of show. And also the reverse is true. Someone who is truly situated on the platform of bhava, ecstatic love, can conceal such symptoms. So you just don't know, except by looking at these 9 characteristics, which can't be hidden and can't be faked. Things like always being eager to use every second in Krishna's service. Indifferent to even the greatest material disturbances. You can't fake that. And nor can you suppress that. But the ashtasattvika, the 8 ecstatic physical symptoms, an actor can fake it. You'll find them in Vrindavan today. We call them sahajiyas. They put on a cheap demonstration and foolish persons are bewildered. Oh, look, I saw this sadhu crying. That must mean the sadhu is situated on the platform of ecstatic love of Krishna. And then someone who's not showing those symptoms, those ecstatic symptoms, physical symptoms, may indeed be situated on the platform of ecstatic love, but conceals those physical symptoms. So, independent of the physical symptoms, Nectar Devotion gives you 9 characteristics of behavior that are impossible to suppress or to fake. So if we had another session, we would go into that. But for today, I felt inspired to make sure you have a personal understanding of Nectar Devotion's transmission so that you could grow attached to Lord Chaitanya speaking to Rupa Goswami. All right, general questions? Yes, you've been very patient, thank you.
Thank you, This is from the earlier part of the session. Can sadhu sangha be conceived or perceived through the other two limbs, Bhagavata Shravana or Nama Kirtana, or has it needs to be a person, a living entity, keeping in mind, especially the prajalpa that actually goes on after attending a class or after a kirtana. So how do we, this is more on the prajalpa aspect, so can the sadhu sangha be conceived through the other limbs of the 5 limbs you mentioned earlier?
Trying to specifically understand what you're getting at. Can you ask it another way? Is that possible?
I was just wondering, is sadhu sangha associated with the, or related to the other 2 angas, of the 5 angas you actually?
Of course, everything is related. You want to have Nama Kirtan with as many genuine sadhus as possible present. You want to have Bhagavat Shravan as much as possible hearing from a sadhu. So it's all related, but Rupa Goswami is, for the sake of your understanding, each of the angas, he's delineating them in a particular way, specifically. But if someone's a sadhu, what are they doing? Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Vasa, Sri Murtira. So it's all related. But just for the sake of our understanding, these delineations, these categorizations are made. As for what our aspiring devotees may do before and after the Bhagavat Shravan, well, what can I say? I'm happy that they were there for Bhagavat Shravan. A journey begins with but a single step. He hasn't asked a question before.
You spoke about a lot about sadhu sangha and importance of sadhu sangha. I wanted to know, like, how should one associate with sadhus? Like, some basic guidelines for it, or
I mentioned that in the very beginning. Who knows? Who remembers? Immediately, you take advantage of the presence of the sadhu to talk about Krishna, ask about Krishna, hear about Krishna. You seize the opportunity. You've ever seized something that you really wanted? Yes. So you have that kind of seizing attitude. You want to hear about Krishna. You want to talk about Krishna. That's your reciprocation with the presence of the sadhu. And in that way, guess what? You'll become a sadhu. It's possible. What will your relatives say? We sent him to Australia to make money and he's becoming a sadhu. We know as soon as his tongue says Hare Krishna, he turns into a brahmachari. Who hasn't asked a question?
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Gurudev, I wanted to ask about Dham visit. How many times we should visit the Dham? And what should be our consciousness? Because many times when devotees speak among themselves, they raise this point saying that wherever Prabhupada went, wherever Prabhupada established the temples, these are the Dhams. So we don't need to go to Dham. So what exactly we should do? Should we go to Dham? And if we go to Dham, they also say that if we go there, I just want to do the service. I just don't want to be the visitor. So how exactly we should take these things?
if you have the opportunity to physically go to the holy Dham, Navadvip, Mayapur, Vrindavan, Jagannath Puri, you should take it. At the same time, it is also true that by your service in Sydney, if it's so dedicated, you can create the atmosphere of the Dham even here. But that takes quite some intensity. It's nothing to be taken cheaply. But it's not very difficult to go to the Dham from here. If you have the opportunity, you take it. And by your presence in the Dham, you're meant to increase your hearing and chanting. Going to the Dham is not simply for shopping. It's for an immersion in hearing and chanting about Krishna. So that should be your foremost concern. Your presence in the Holy Dham is not so much for the eyes, it's for the ears and the tongue. Ishvareshvara.
Hare Krishna very much. I was just wondering, I think you read something about Rupa Swami that even though he had apparently disqualifications in his material life, that because of his service attitude, that he then got the mercy. So I was just wondering if that is like, because Bhakti, as you explained, is causeless, independent of any material cause, but then it seems like those kind of people who serve faithfully some material master, are they more likely to take up Bhakti than those who try to be a material boss?
Say the last two sentences again.
Like people who are in Maya in the way of serving.
People who are in Maya in the way of serving what?
Some material cause.
Yeah.
As servants.
Mm-hmm.
Are they more likely to take up Bhakti than those who try to be controllers? Obviously, in one way or other, everyone tries to be controller and ultimately servant.
Positions of power in the material world make your false ego expand. So often it can be harder for such persons to approach Bhakti because they're used to dominating others. This is why Queen Kuti prays, Janmaishvaya Shruta Shivya Edamana Madakrama. Those who are bewildered by their aristocratic birth, their wealth, their learning, their beauty, they can't call out the holy name of Krishna with love. They're infatuated with their own sense of self-worth. If such persons, somehow or other, by the mercy of a devotee, would take to Bhakti with their powerful position, they could do so much to spread Mahaprabhu's mission. Just like Maharaja Prataparudra. Lord Chaitanya wouldn't even see him at first. He wanted so much to get the darshan of Mahaprabhu. But as Mahaprabhu's followers told the king, Lord Chaitanya does not even see kings in dreams, what to speak of during the day. They tried. The associates of Mahaprabhu tried this way, that way, but Mahaprabhu refused. They told Mahaprabhu, the king is such a great devotee. And Lord Chaitanya said, that may be so, but there's one word attached to his name that ruins everything. King. But Prataparuta used his position to serve devotees, to make so many arrangements for Lord Chaitanya's devotees. So yes, it's true that someone with a lot of political or economic power is generally very puffed up, but somehow or other, if they can engage in service to Mahaprabhu's mission, they can accomplish a lot. Okay?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, you mentioned that the 9 symptoms of love of Godhead cannot be faked or conceived. Can you share any of the instances Prabhupada manifested these symptoms?
You're all the time, those 9 symptoms. Those are not physical systems. Those are not physical symptoms. But the Ashtasattvika, the 8 physical symptoms, can be faked or concealed. Yes, I have seen Srila Prabhupada break out into Ashtasattvika, the 8 physical symptoms, and then immediately stop his lecture and walk out of the room. Okay?
Thank you.
And he refused to talk about it.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have a question. So, can a particular mood turn into pride during a conversation between 2 devotees?
Of course. Anything in Kali Yuga can turn into pride.
Yes, so
I've got a new toothbrush, I'm so proud. Anything. That's a symptom of Kali Yuga.
So what are the things that we need to be aware of so that we realize that we don't cultivate pride during a conversation?
That if even Rupa Goswami considered himself wretched, what to speak of us? How we should consider ourselves. You can constantly ask yourself, why do I think I'm superior to this devotee? Why do I think that I'm so special? You ask yourself that question all the time. Got it?